I'm Rob Sarney, and you're listening to What the Heck Fintech, where you'll experience and learn that Fintech is Fin Life. Let's get started. Welcome, everybody. You have a great guest speaker to hear today. This is a extremely fantastic fintech friend of mine, collaborating with me, and I'm with him all the time. We've done stuff for years. Marcel Blais, a mathematical science professor at WPI, and he has a lot of stories. He's done so much. He's going to take this to a whole different angle with all that data science and AI and financial math, and he's the genius that keeps me smart. So Marcel, welcome. And I'd love to have you do a little spin of your journey here. How did you get into fintech? I mean, you've been, similar to me, you've been doing fintech for your whole life. You just didn't have a name for it, right? It's always technical, especially at WPI. It's such a deep STEM school, and you're deep into the math and financial math, obviously. So give us a little spin of what you do and how do you get into the fintech journey?
Well, thank you, Rob. It's great to be here. I'm very excited to be part of this podcast. This is a really cool podcast that you're doing. To give you some of the story, I guess I could start maybe with grad school. I did my graduate degree from 1999 to 2005 at Cornell in applied math, but my focus was in operations research and financial math, as you mentioned. And I did my thesis work on the topic of liquidity in finance. So that's already getting a little fintechy from back then. Then after that, I came to WPI as a postdoc, and I was going to be at WPI for 3 years, but then I ended up sticking around for 20 instead. And around 2008 was when I first started doing projects. So I was teaching in the financial math master's program 05 to 08, but I started doing projects with industry partners in 08 in our summer REU programs. And you could have called that fintech if there was such a moniker back then. And I was working with companies like, initially State Street was the first partner, more specifically State Street Global. And we were doing things that were better characterized as mathematical finance, but we were doing those kinds of industry projects, teams of students working on these things. And I kind of got the bug for that then and stuck with it. Did a lot of those types of projects through our Center for Industrial Mathematics and Statistics, which is a group of faculty at WPI who work in math and stats with industry partners. Tons of the project work with that was fintech. So working with some of the big financial firms, working with small startups, mostly math majors, I would say, some math CS double majors. And then neighborhood of 2016, maybe, is when I started working with partners in different disciplines. And so this is when I think the fintech was really unlocked, because we had the Wall Street Project Center at WPI, which you're obviously very familiar with. You and I worked together very closely in that. And it was when the founder, Professor Art Gerstenfeld, retired. It was rebranded as this fintech project center.
Yeah, he's the godfather of fintech at WPI. He's the one who really got it started. Like, we should make a statue of him.
That's true. And so he had this project center set up where the students were working in a fully immersed way in WPI's B term, which Rob and I know that very well, having worked together, but that means the second half of the fall semester. 7 weeks, fully immersed, working full-time, no other classes, no other distractions, on a project provided by an industrial sponsor. So after he retired and it was really kind of rebranded in the fintech way, we started working really in this interdisciplinary way with faculty from different disciplines, advising students. And so that kind of leads up to what you and I did together in that fintech project center, where we had really the dream team with you, me, and our colleague Wilson Wong in the CS department, and we would advise students with all these different majors. And I really think this is the coolest thing, where we have this consulting style shop where we can bring in, students from math, business, information systems, computer science, data science, you name it, whatever the right combination is for the needs of a sponsor.
Sometimes civil engineering.
Yeah.
And all majors are fintech majors, whether they like it or not.
Yep. And then, of course, the dawn of the fintech major showed up just a couple of years ago, and so now we have fintech majors in the mix there. But I think moving to the model of interdisciplinary teams was absolutely key. Maybe to tell a little bit of a story there, I would see when I would work with students in just the math discipline, we would do incredible things for the projects, but you get a different full package deliverable when you can have a team of interdisciplinary majors, because a team of mathematicians will do all kinds of great modeling, great analysis, great prototyping, but I think usually you're seeing prototyping, not full-fledged software development. When you get those interdisciplinary teams, when you have software engineers from your CS major, they can put things together that are ready for prime time for a sponsor. So you can go from the sponsor's goals all the way through the model development process, implementation, testing, syncing up with data, software engineering, deliverable software that can go live. And when that happens, which is pretty frequently, I think we have a pretty high win rate on pulling that off. Really amazing things can be accomplished. And I think that's where we are today.
One thing I was just going to jump in on, which is you just got me thinking of a side story. When I first interviewed at WPI for the professor job, for fintech and everything, and you were on that committee, and it was via Zoom, actually, even though I was only 4 miles away from campus. Like, I go on campus, everyone goes, no, we'll do it on Zoom. I'm like, okay, I don't think it's going to go too well. But you're the one who asked me the question, so what do you think of interdisciplinary projects? And you're the one who asked me. I just got a flashback on that, and my answer was with the same answer I do now. I go, of course, that's how you get things done. If you had all finance people or all computer science or all one of anything, that delivery is not going to be that good. It might be good, but it won't be great. It takes a village to get stuff done. You need those disciplines. Life is interdisciplinary. And I still think that today, because that's what the real world is. That's what industry is all about. You never do a project just with one department of one skill in that department. Never. But sometimes in academia, they end up doing that, but that's what I love about it's make it as real world as possible. So it's got a flashback. I had to share that with you because
I remember that.
That question.
I do remember that now that you mentioned it. That was quite a while ago. But yeah, we did awesome work together with those projects. I mean, how many projects did you and I collaborate on? Probably 40. We did a lot, and they were all great. And I think that interdisciplinary nature is absolutely key. And you're right, too, in the real world, in most industrial settings, you're working with people from all different disciplines, and you have to explain things to people who are not experts in your area. It's one thing to give a presentation as a mathematician to a group of mathematicians. It's another to present your work and provide a deliverable to a general audience who's going to actually put it to work.
Yep, absolutely. Wow, yeah, because we've done so many projects together, and just so to really open people's mind on how critical financial math and mathematical sciences is for fintech. For the projects you've been involved in, what are when you see a math student, a data science student, what are those skills that you look at? Because we had we sometimes we rejected students to come into our projects because they might have not been the right fit. What do you look for? What's that X factor you look for in those? Because I always, in Marcel, I trust if it was data science and financial math, and you make the call. But obviously, I'd give my 2 cents. But what were the skills that you looked at that really was that? And what are the skills that makes them that X factor that gets them to the next level, which they'll excel at fintech projects.
I think the thing there is to look for specialists. That's the eye that I'm always trying to put on these things when we're creating these project teams, because you may have two data science majors who are very different in terms of their background and their specialties. So, our data science major is a joint major between math, business, and computer science, and students have to have core studies in each of those areas. They lean towards one or two more than the others. So you may have a data science student who leans very heavily into, say, statistics and machine learning. Then you may have another data science who leans more towards information systems or more towards computer programming, software development.
Yep.
And so depending on the project, some of those data science majors will be more appropriate specialists. A perfect example was we had a project with a sponsor. This was maybe 3 years ago, where we had data science, computer science, business, and we had one mathematical sciences major. And the math major had just the right skill set to delve into the field of time series analysis and create a time series model that the sponsor was then able to, I should say that the computer science majors were able to build software around that model, implementing that model. The data science student had the right flavor of data science major to understand how all the financial data tied in to that time series model. And everything kind of came together with this working software with a fairly sophisticated time series model behind it. And the success of that really did happen because the students had all those specialties that we, you, me, and Wilson put the right kind of team together.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an interesting thing. It isn't as simple as just this team needs a CS major, a data science major, an industrial engineering major, and a fintech major. You need to look at what the students are specifically concentrating on in their major. And
yeah, that's the same thing in industry. Sure, they have the skills, but everybody's unique. Everyone brings different skills and strengths and something to the team, so to make that team great. I remember that project too. I remember you saying, I think you had that student as a TA for you too, and you're like, oh, he's lights out. He's lights out on this time series stuff. What do you see? I'm like, yeah, let's go. I remember that, pulling that rabbit out of the hat. It was awesome.
And that's an interesting thing too, because a lot of the work that student did in that time series model for the sponsor was more advanced than what you would see typically. We now offer actually a time series course. We didn't at the time, but the student had all of the prep to be able to go down that rabbit hole and get the deeper knowledge required to actually make the model for that.
Yep.
That project, which was a really cool project, and the sponsor loved it.
Yeah, no, I remember that one. Now I'm gonna switch up a question with you. So, and I truly don't know the answer, right? So, quantitative finance. Anytime a student reaches out to me because they think I know about quantitative finance and I don't, and I say, I know someone who really can help you with this, Marcel, and I point them in your direction. So, when you see a student in mathematical sciences or in any major, and they want to do quantitative finance, how do you know if they're right for that? What's the strengths, the skills? Because my guess is it's not for everybody, but I could be wrong with that. So what's your take on that? And kind of explain it for our audience too, and how it can relate to fintech.
Sure, that's a great question. I actually have been in talks over the past year with one particular student. I mean, we've been talking every few weeks, trying to figure out his way into that area. So quantitative finance is really, it goes by many monikers: quantitative finance, mathematical finance, financial engineering. Some places you'll hear financial statistics, operations research, and financial engineering. You'll hear all these different names, and they're pretty close to computational finance. They're pretty close to synonymous. And really, it just means it's a name for an area where you're applying sophisticated mathematical models, usually from the areas of probability, stochastics, which is really just a fancy word for how do you deal with things that change randomly in time, machine learning, now AI, and computer science. And you're using this in the finance world. And so people call the people who work in that industry are called quants. And so you need a pretty sophisticated technical background to get into that field. The most common majors to get into that field of quant finance are math and computer science. So I usually tell students that if you want to work in quant finance, math major or computer science major, those are your best choices. But your best choice is to double major in math and computer science.
Mm.
And it's kind of interesting because what happens with the material is in a typical major, math or computer science, when you finish your degree, you will have seen a little bit of the area of quant finance, but really you're ready to start because you need quite a sophisticated foundation in at least one of those two areas to be able to get into that industry. What's the other thing that you always have to keep in mind in the quant finance industry is the industry is known for grueling interviews. And
Really?
yeah, it's famous for it. And what people are looking for in those interviews are people who can think on their feet under pressure in a creative and intelligent way. So one very common thing that happens in quant finance interviews are riddles. And so people will throw riddles at you and you don't necessarily have to solve the riddle, but they want to see how you work through it, how you problem solve. And you're under pressure because you're in a job interview. But it's a very common thing. Like one of my favorite riddles that I had talked to a colleague in a hedge fund actually who would use this in interviews was, if I give you a coin and I tell you, I don't know that this coin is fair. So if it has two sides, if you flip it, the probability of heads might be 50%. It might be weighted, so it might be 63%. You don't know. How can you use that coin to devise a method to get the equivalent of a 50-50 coin flip? And a lot of the interviewees would not figure it out, but it's the process. How do you work through it? How do you talk with the interviewer and try and solve that? And so there's tons of these things, and there's books now. There have been books for a while that are just filled with types of questions. The first one was this book called Heard It on the Street. That's probably 15, 20 years old, but you can practice these types of things and get a little bit better at it than if you just go in having not done these. So you have to be ready for these types of interview questions. The other thing I tell students in these interviews, and this is really important, and I think a lot of students miss this. Read, I don't care what source you want to use, pick a source that's a reputable source for financial news. Wall Street Journal. If you don't want to pay for a subscription, use the Yahoo Finance, whatever, and read completely from start to finish at least 2 articles a day. Because when you go into a job interview like this, if you go in and you know all of your technical stuff, your math, financial math, computer science, whatever it is, you know it really well. But somebody says like, oh, what do you think about the yield curve? Or what do you think about what's happening with, this current tariff situation or whatever it may be? If you have no idea what they're talking about, you look like a bookworm who likes the idea of working in fintech or in finance, but you don't really know the industry. So you've got to ground yourself in what's going on a day-to-day basis for at least a year.
Yep. So you actually do know that industry and you can talk about it and talk about the challenges and where there's opportunities and understand that. So then you can apply that genius math. stuff for everything. Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's fundamental, I think, for everything, right? You have to really understand that fundamental knowledge so you can really add really big value to that company or that project or that group or that customer. It's all about understanding, Wow.
Yeah, and I think that gets missed. I think, well, students are very focused on their classes and their grades, but you have to think about the big picture of the industry that you're trying to get into, and you need to familiarize yourself with what's going on in it.
Please come back for part 2 with Marcel Blais, as Marcel Blais goes deeper into not just project-based learning for students, but how it really helps professors to teach fintech. Thank you for listening to What the Heck, Fintech. Make sure you tune into our next episode as we continue to interview fintech leaders and share real-world stories from across the fintech ecosystem, so you can fully understand that fintech is fin life.